Hello everyone. Another episode of Herald Tribune World Youth Forum from 1954. This episode youngsters talk about does the key to peace in this century rest with the non-white peoples? And participated following students. Marlene ROODT Martin from South Africa. Erik Stig Jorgensen from Denmark. Tatty Sampoerno Larasati from Indonesia. Fifi Lebrecht W. Hesse from Ghana. Presenter of the discussion is Mrs. Helen Height-Waller. Here we go to the video.
This is National Educational Television, a program distributed by the Educational Television and Radio Center.
Does the key to peace in this century lie with the non-white peoples?
In order to answer this question, I would like to ask another question first. Exactly where do you draw the line between white and non-white?
The question seems to imply a certain skepticism towards the white peoples. Since the white peoples have already in this first half of this century fought 2 world wars, it seems quite natural for a lot of people to look towards the non-white peoples for peacemaking in this century.
I don't see what skin-colored people has to do with peacemaking. In my mind, peace depends on understanding and goodwill of all nations in the world, no matter what color they are.
There never will be peace on the continent of Africa so long as the blacks are separated from the whites.
This is the world we want, with young people from the 4 corners of the globe brought together by the New York Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools. Here to discuss the world we want under the direction of Helen Height-Waller.
Let me introduce you now to the 4 students that are going to take part in tonight's discussion. First, there's Marlene ROODT from the Union of South Africa. Marlene's been engaging in a full program of student activities in her host community, including even a group session of babysitting last Saturday, right, Marlene? Erik Jorgensen from Denmark is still trying to persuade some people that they don't have polar bears in Copenhagen. Tatty Sampoerno from Indonesia has an article about her in the current issue, the February 9th issue of World Week. That's one of the scholastic magazines. It's in a unit on Indonesia. And Fifi, or Lebrecht Wilhelm Hesse, more properly, from the Gold Coast, is speaking so much English here that he admitted reluctantly tonight he's writing letters home in English now instead of in his own language of God. Now, before we get into tonight's discussion, I'd like awfully to ask each of you whether you've had any experience in the 7 weeks you've been here in the area of race relations that has either confirmed opinions you had about race relations in the United States or changed them.
Well, firstly, I'd like to tell something which happened even before I came. When we landed in Accra, North Africa, somebody came up to me and said, "Would you like to meet the delegate from the Gold Coast and the girl from Nigeria?" For me as a South African, this was a very wonderful experience because it's the first time that I have been able to meet Africans on that term. And I was very afraid because I thought they would not like me. But when I met Fifi and Minji, I saw that everything was different and we became wonderful friends.
It was a pleasure, Marlene, for me to meet you at the Accra airport, you know. And I also felt very uneasy having to meet you for the first time, coming from South Africa and knowing what South Africa really is to the African. But we got on very fine. And in about 2 hours, 3 of us were sitting on 2 seats with a big box of chocolates on our laps. I think we got on very well.
What was your feeling when you met for the first time each other, I mean?
Well, the only feeling that I had was they know about South Africa's policy and they don't agree with it. And I thought they would not like to meet me, but I found out different.
Well, I thought at first that, well, perhaps you might have an air of white superiority about you,
No.
but you never did.
Did you make the whole trip together then, the 3 of you?
Oh, yes. We landed in Lisbon for 4 hours, and we got into a taxi cab, and the thing was just about falling to pieces. And we had the fun of our lives in Lisbon that day, and we became very close friends because we were all away from...
You remember, this is the...
Yes, I do.
Yes, it was a wonderful experience in Lisbon. I wonder how we got on very well with the two of us. You and me got on so well, but you can't get on so well with the Africans in South Africa, Marlene.
Well, you see, Fifi, this actually is, you are very different from the Africans in our country. You are an educated young man, and the natives in our country are so different. Somebody has said that they are about 200 years behind us in civilization, and we are now having a very hard time trying to get them on the same level as we are. And as they develop, we are giving them more rights and more right to govern. And I think in about 200 years' time, there will be no thing as a South African problem, that we will have solved it by then. And after all, we are all people of one world, and that is what we are working for. And we as South Africans feel it our duty to help our less fortunate people in our country, and we are doing our very, very best for them, and I hope...
Excuse me, Marlene. Wait a minute, Fifi, you two. Erik I wanted to ask Erik before we go on, and you have a word with Marlene. Have you had any experiences here in the United States that have either confirmed or changed beliefs you had about race relations here?
Well, before I came over here, I had the impression that most of the problems in race relations, at least between young people, had been solved with the legal desegregation of schools. But I have found that it isn't that way. I've seen schools where the colored people gathered in small groups in the cafeterias, and I have been at parties where the white boys refused to dance with the colored girls. And I had a very interesting experience. It was a delegate from a European country with whom I stayed. She went up to one of the boys and said, "Why don't you dance with my host?" The hostess, her hostess was colored. And the boy became quite embarrassed. And we had a rather interesting discussion about it. And he said, this society, this community is not mature for intermarriage. I found that rather interesting.
Do you have anything on this point, or do you want to take your turn now and answer Marlene, Fifi?
Well, I think I'll ask her a question. I hope you won't mind asking me why the African in South Africa is 200 years behind the European, but the African in West Africa is so near the European.
Well, Fifi, you are certainly putting me on the spot there. But in our country, it's been very much different. These natives came into contact with Western, if I can call it Western, civilization in just brief spots now and then, and it was only until the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910 that they really started getting under Western influence and that they really started getting educated.
I hope you... well, we've also been in contact with the Europeans for at least 500 years now,
yes.
But we're still very much near to you. But I don't want to drag you into any further discussion. For one thing, Africa is just a small spot of the world, and though Africa is an important factor in world peace, I would like to hear what Tatty has got to say about the Asians. I'm very sure that the Asiatics have got a very definite role to play in world peace. At the moment, the United States and Great Britain are looking on Prime Minister Nehru of India to settle to arrange for a ceasefire on Formosa. What do you think about that, Tatty?
About that? I don't know exactly, because when I left my country, I can't read the newspaper from my country, you know. So what I know about my country this time is that there will be a conference between Asian and African countries.
Tatty, let's go back to the previous question. What about this matter of feelings of racial superiority that we've been verging on, as we talked about Africa? Is there any feeling in Asia still of white superiority?
Yes, you know, Indonesia has been under the rule of the Dutch. So, I mean, now we can recognize it in the Chinese restaurant or European restaurant that they serve the white people first and then the native people, you know.
Still?
Yes, and most of the people, they like to talk in a Dutch language. They feel that They are very proud if they talk in a Dutch language. That's very funny, isn't it?
It does seem strange. You've had your freedom now for how many years?
Since 45.
Since 45.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure that the superiority complex of the white means so much in reality. I mean...
Do you think it exists, Erik? Do white people feel superior just because they're white?
Well, not very many.
I think it really does exist, and it's about time most white men stop thinking about African culture as only worthy of being museum pieces and something worth considering.
Well, I've got another point here. I think it's time that the other minority groups start fighting for their rights instead of always just keeping quiet about it and talking about it. But I think it's time that they do
Marlene,
something
What do you mean by other
Marlene,
minorities?
yes.
No, well, I just meant by that what you said that they were being museum pieces, and like I don't actually, I meant the group that are always supposed to be, like you said in your country, they would serve the Dutch first. That's
Yes,
right.
that's
You must
right.
fight for your rights. If you were there first, they've got to serve you first.
Well, Marlene,
No.
will you tell us something about the stand of the South African government on this problem? I said in my introductory remarks that
Yes.
there will never be peace on the African continent so long as the whites and blacks are kept apart. And a great Gold Coast African once said that you can play all sorts of keys on the black and you can play all sorts of tunes on the white keys, but for harmony, you must play both.
Yes, Fifi, I agree with you entirely on that. But you must understand this, and I know it's very hard for you to understand, that we have a very hard struggle in my country. And the minute we have these natives educated and civilized, I'm sure we are Christians, and we know that we can't dominate one race. As they develop, they'll get their rights and they'll be recognized in the world. You always just blame South Africa, but I know that in the United States even, where they profess equality, no real equality does exist in all places. When I arrived here the morning when we landed at Idlewild Airport, I was very surprised and much taken aback to see that people still whispered and talked because I walked in between of you, Fifi, and Minji, while to me, a South African, it made absolutely no difference.
I never noticed that, you know. But speaking about educating the African, how long do you think it's going to take you to bring them to the state that we've come to? The British, who are supposed to be a very liberal people and broad-minded in their educational
Yes.
policy, even they stayed in India for 300 years, and when they got out, only 20% of the people were illiterate.
Yes, but that's a different case. The British people who went to India didn't go there to make it their permanent home. They were merely officers there. The people of South Africa have come to make it their country. They've got no other place to go. And there they are going to stay. And we feel it our duty, and we are educating them. And I haven't got the exact figures with me, but I can prove to you, Fifi, after this, that South African natives are more literate than the people of India are.
What about returning for a moment to the few people living outside Africa?
Well,
All right, don't talk too much about Africa.
It seems to me as if the people in Asia, for instance, in a sort of a negative sense, have the key to peace, because the terrible material circumstances of many people in Asia and their dissatisfaction with their material circumstances is, as far as I see it, one of the principal causes of tension and even of war, for instance, the war in Indochina.
yes, I do agree with you. Poverty makes people susceptible to communism, and that is one of the very important factors which the whites, who are well fortunate to be above the coloreds, must always consider and bear in mind. But one thing too they must never forget is that they have been creating conditions for communism to thrive. If there is going to be communism in Africa, it will be of the Europeans' own making. That is my personal opinion. When you deny the African the right to vote, when you deny him equal educational facilities, but you tell him that I'll give you separate but equal education, I tell you separate but equal educational facilities are inherently unequal. These are the conditions which make people susceptible to communism. You must remove those conditions and it will make Africa safe from the threat of communism.
I don't agree with you, Fifi, but I think I'll give Erik a chance because I've been saying so much.
But, Marlene, may I ask you, what are the native people in your country? Is that the same as in Lebrecht's country?
No, it's not. We have in our country what we call Bantus, and they consist of different native tribes with different native languages, different habits, and different customs. And if they were one group, we would have had a much easier fight. But now we have not one race. We have a few, and each of them demand the same rights for their tribe.
But what about the Indian people who are in South Africa?
These Indian citizens have come to South Africa many years ago to work on our rice fields. And there was a plan by which if they wanted to return to their country, they could, and they need not pay the passage back. The Indian people found themselves so happy in our country that very few of them ever returned. And that answers my question. If they don't like our rule, they are free to go. But they want to stay there, so they've got to accept our government if they want to stay.
Marlene, do you know that some Indians in South Africa regard themselves in much the same light as you, the Dutch, regard yourselves? I mean, as Afrikaners. They've been brought up, they've been born in South Africa, they've been brought up, they've come to regard South Africa as their home. It is humanly impossible for them to go back to India or Pakistan, wherever they might have come from. And I would like you to know this, Marlene. To the African nationalists, the talk which is now going on these days about deporting these 300,000 Indians back to India or Pakistan is never more preposterous than sending you 2.5 million Europeans into Europe.
Well, could I tell you that the Indians in our country still speak their own language, follow their own religion, wear their own clothes, and that very few of them can speak my language.
But what
very few of
yes,
you Dutch
they stay Indians. If they want to become South African citizens, they'll have to adopt our language. People who come to the United States to stay make themselves United States citizens and follow the rules of the United States. We expect the same of them.
Marlene and, well, all four of you, let me ask you this question. You're discussing whether communism is aided by the treatment of people in native Africa or in some places of Asia. Did any of you see the story in this morning's paper about the forcible evacuation of native populations in Johannesburg from Sophiatown? Any reactions on that?
Yes, I read it. And I can only ask you all to read the last paragraph, which said that they were removed to better homes where they pay less rent than they paid in the slum areas. My father's on the committee for the removal of the slum areas, and he, by personal experience, told me how eager these people were to get out of the slum areas into their own homes with a place for a garden. And the few people who did not like that is about 1% of the population. The people that are against this are the white people and people who own stores in these slum areas, and it's not true that these Africans own most of the land. They hired these apartments at the most fabulous prices, and it's these owners who are causing the complaints because they are losing the money. And
Marlene, did you ever see Sophiatown?
Yes, I did, and I must say that I felt very, very unhappy when I passed through there because the conditions are terrible, and I expect no human being to live in a place like that. And how any person can rebel against being moved from there is just above my understanding.
Marlene, I don't think well, I shouldn't say this, but you are trying to say that we must be grateful to the South African government for providing these new houses for the Africans. But it's my personal opinion, frankly, that I don't think you do deserve the grace, the thanks that you are out on the lookout for. I think you've been forced to do these things because you have to do them. You've been forced by circumstances to do something for the African. What is the stand of your government in settling this race problem in South Africa? That is what I would like to know, Marlene.
Well,
But please, are we talking about the peace in the world or
Look,
about
as a matter of
Africa?
fact, what the European or white man does in Africa with regard to his relationship with the black man will go a very long way in influencing world peace. Believe me.
Let's
Yes,
let
let-
Marlene.
let Marlene-
Let's let Marlene answer that question. Just what is the position of your government, Marlene, in its attitude and actions for the native population?
well, this is the way we feel that we, in a way, are fathers to these people, and that our idea is to establish two different communities, where the white man has at the moment no right in areas set aside for the black man. The black man has rights in our areas. They stay, if they work as our domestic servants, they are allowed to stay there, but we are not allowed in their territories. And as these Bantus develop, that's what we call our natives, we will give them more right, more government, and when they are right to accept self-government, it will be given to them. This has been the promise made by our Prime Minister, and as you know him, he's a man that keeps to his promises. If he said, I'll do it, he will.
Marlene, you know, I would like to tell you something about what we in the Gold Coast feel about apartheid.
Yes.
For us, it is, however plausible apartheid may sound to anybody, it is a piece of deception that deceives no one. You see, the case for apartheid collapses before the hard facts of Africa, land and labor. Where do you want the Africans to live? They are terribly overcrowded on their locations. In fact, there is no land for them to live apart on.
Oh, no? How do you know? Have you visited South Africa?
That is what Alan Paton, the most intelligent writer on the South African problem, is put down.
There's one thing in this I don't understand. How can Negroes, Africans, be so backward in South Africa and so relatively advanced and well educated in the Gold Coast?
I think I've got a very simple answer for that. The European, when he came to South Africa, at first found out that it was to his advantage to keep the African in that position, to make him do the menial jobs, not to educate him and just make him work for him. Yeah. And he's done that for the past 100 or 50 years that he's been in South Africa. Now he's got up to the realization that, well, the African is rising up from his slumber. He's demanding rights. What the African need now is the right to vote. That is the last thing which the South African government will give to the African. Dr. Malan once said that if the other Africans, and by that he means the Africans in South Africa, are going to demand with the same success what the Negroes in West Africa have gained, it will mean only one thing for the white man, that is his exclusion from Cairo to the Union. And what have we in West Africa gained that has so scared Dr. Malan? The right to vote for our own representatives and the prospects of eventual self-determination.
Well, our Bantus have been given that promise too. Don't forget that. And I'm just about Alan Paton. I don't want to argue with any person who has just one view about my country. I don't think it's fair to argue with any person who has looked at a certain thing from one side. If you have looked at it from both sides, if you have lived in my country, I will be willing to discuss it with you.
Marlene,
but
that
you,
is one
no,
thing.
wait, you have solved it, your problem in your way, because the people, white people in your country, never actually settle there permanently.
I know
very,
that.
Very few.
I know
we
that.
are an established nation, Fifi.
I know you are.
And they are a nation. We expect them to expect our rights as we expect theirs.
I think we should get back
How
to
many
the
times
main
have
problem.
Give Erik a chance.
I think we should get back to the main problem. It seemed, although there seem to be great problems in Africa, it seems as if we agreed that the key to peace didn't entirely be in the hands of the non-white peoples.
Yes, it is. It is not entirely in the
No,
non-whites,
not
and
at
neither
all.
is it in the hands of the whites
Yes,
alone.
it lies in the world.
And
Yes.
that is why I've always harped on this fact that you can't separate the blacks and whites and hope to work for a peaceful solution.
I think it's fair to ask you at this point, what do you see of the future in South Africa? You've tried to make a case, Marlene, and I think for a difficult position you've done it very effectively. for a system of government in which two races will be living in the same country but totally separate. Do you expect that to be a temporary arrangement, or will it go on? I'd like to hear all four of you discuss whether you can create this new kind of government.
Well, I think that is possible. We have tried everything, and this is the ultimate resolution, that these people will get their independence. That is a promise we, the people of South Africa, have made to them, and we intend in keeping it.
When do you expect that will happen?
But, Marlene,
it may take 100 years to work out. You can't change a nation in a day. You can't change a nation in a year. You can't educate them in a year. It takes time, just as it's taken time in the United States. And it will take time in my country. But we are people of one world, and I'm sure in 150 years' time, we'll look back and say, was there a problem like that?
Marlene, since you are so much bent on segregation, would you like us to give you a part of Africa for you, the whites, to go and settle? Say the Gold Coast. It's a fairly prosperous country, you know.
Yes, but we can't expect that of us. We fought for our freedom there for 300 years. We built our homes. We built everything which dear to us. We established a language, and we're proud of that as you're
Marlene,
proud of your country.
One thing you must never forget. What South Africa is now is the compound efforts of both the blacks and the whites. However menial or however small the contribution of the African has been, he is always sure of one fact. He's definitely been indispensable.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt. Our time is almost up. You've each got a chance to say just one more thing if you want to.
I'd just like to say, however much people might condemn South Africa, please look at the real facts and try to see both sides. And I'm very sure that we will one day have peace in my country. That's what we all want.
Well, the most important point, in my opinion, and the point I've had a hard time trying to bring up in this discussion, is that the key to peace doesn't lie with one nation, with one race. It lies with everybody. It lies with you. It lies with me.
I think that if there is a goodwill and understanding between all nations in the world, then there will be peace.
Marlene, I'm not trying to condemn South Africa, but I would like to say this. In the process of world history, some animals have disappeared from the face of this earth because they could not adapt themselves to changing conditions. Africa is changing. The African is moving. The white man cannot stop him. He can either move with him or get trampled.
We're moving with them. They're moving with us.
I'm afraid we've got to leave it there. You've been listening to 4 students among the 34 students from 34 countries who are in this country as delegates to the 1955 Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools. They are Marlene ROODT from South Africa, Erik Jorgensen from Denmark, Tatty Sampoerno from Indonesia, and Fifi Lebrecht Wilhelm Hesse from the Gold Coast. Tomorrow, the whole group of 34 students is going to Washington for 5 days. The 5 days there will include many visits to officials in Washington, and on Tuesday noon, a visit with President Eisenhower at the White House. So it may well be that in our discussion a week from tonight, at least part of the time will be devoted to some talk about these exciting events that are going to take place in Washington beginning tomorrow.
We Want, a program featuring students from 34 countries from every corner of the earth. These young people are spending 3 months in the United States as delegates to the 9th Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools to be held at the United Nations. The students are guests in homes of American students in the New York area. This program is presented in the public interest by the New York Herald Tribune in cooperation with the Educational Television and Radio Center.
The preceding program was distributed by the Educational Television and Radio Center. This is National Educational Television.